Bull refused to leave the cliff edge, a terrifying and dangerous sight, until a boy called its name. What happens next will leave you speechless. Calder nodded grimly. Then we find another way. He tapped the ledger with his calloused fingers. If the city sees this, if they read it themselves, Holt cannot silence them all. Meanwhile, Brutus came and went as though the alleys were his true pasture. Each dawn, he returned scarred, sometimes limping, but never broken. Calder wondered if Holt's hunters clashed with him at night, yet the bull always came back, standing near the workshop as if guarding its door. Children began to leave scraps of bread or apples at corners, whispering quiet prayers to the beast they thought might hear. Men toasted him with mugs of bitter ale, while watchmen sharpened spears and set traps in shadowed lanes. Brutus was hunted and revered in equal measure, his legend growing faster than Calder could control. The chance Calder sought came from a forgotten relic. While combing through the ledger's notes, he discovered mention of an abandoned printing press, once used for counterfeit permits by Holt's men, now left to rust in a derelict warehouse. When Calder showed the entry to Toven, the old machinist's lips curved into the faintest smile. A press, eh? If it still runs, that may be our hammer together. Under the veil of night, they cleared dust and cobwebs from the machine. Toven, with his practiced hands, coaxed gears back into motion, oiling rusted cogs until the old press groaned to life. For days they labored in secrecy, copying pages from the ledger, each sheet bearing Holt's crimes in stark, unflinching ink. The smell of oil and ink filled the workshop, staining their hands black. Soon, workers found the papers slipped under tavern doors, folded into tool crates, nailed to posts outside factories. The word spread like wildfire. Names of children taken, shipments hidden, lives sold. Murmurs rose into anger. Anger turned into resistance. Holt's empire, built upon silence and shadows, began to crack beneath the weight of truth made visible. Dramatic irony cut sharp through these victories. For while the people rallied, Calder knew it was not justice that moved officials to act. Men who once spat at him now sent quiet messengers, urging him to come forward with protection. Not because they believed in law, but because the people demanded answers. Calder saw it for what it was, fear of losing control. Still, he played along, feeding only what strengthened the workers' resolve while keeping the ledger itself hidden. But Holt did not retreat quietly. He struck back with fire. One midnight, as rain lashed against the rooftops, Tovan's workshop erupted in flames. Calder awoke choking on smoke, Bryn clinging to his arm, Darren pounding at the door. The inferno spread fast, sparks leaping from timber to timber, tools bursting in the heat. For a heartbeat, Calder thought it was the end. Then Brutus came. The bull rammed through the collapsing wall, his hide seared by flame, his horns scattering burning beams. He pushed through smoke and fire, shoving Calder and the boys toward the street. The roar of the blaze mixed with his bellows, a terrifying, magnificent sound. Tovan stumbled behind, coughing hard but alive, dragged by Calder's grip. Through the rain-slick chaos, Holt emerged from the shadows, his blade gleaming. His face twisted in cruel satisfaction as he closed in. "You think ink will change this city?" he mocked, stepping closer. "The people will never trust a factory hand. My word weighs more than yours ever will." Calder stood firm, though the heat licked his back and his lungs burned with smoke. He tightened his hold on a length of iron pipe, meeting Holt's sneer with defiance. "Not anymore," he said, his voice raw. "They've seen what you are. You can't silence them all." Holt lunged. The blade flashed in the firelight, coming down in a deadly arc. But before it struck, Brutus charged. With a thunderous impact, the bull's horns drove into Holt's chest, lifting him from his feet. Holt's cry was drowned by the roar of flame and the bull's fury. The crime lord's reign ended not with law or judgment, but with the raw power of the beast he had once tried to break. When silence fell, only the crackle of dying fire and the patter of rain remained. Calder stood in the ruins, chest heaving, soot streaking his face. Darren clutched his shoes once more, pressing against Calder's side. Bryn held tight to his brother's arm, wide-eyed but unhurt. Nearby, Brutus loomed, his breath heavy, his gaze steady as though he understood the weight of what had been done. Harrowfen would never be the same. Holt's network collapsed in days, crushed beneath evidence and fury. Officials scrambled to claim control, but the people knew the truth. They remembered who had stood against darkness, who had fought for the voiceless. Calder felt a quiet shift within himself, realizing he had stepped beyond wages and survival. He had entered a larger fight, one he had never asked for but could not abandon. And at the heart of it stood Brutus, not as a beast. The other scoffed. "Danger? That beast hasn't hurt anyone. It just stands there." Refuses to leave, Calder stiffened, his stomach twisting. Holt's men, if they went after Brutus, they'd kill him. He could see it already, The nets, the hooks, the brute force used against a creature that had done nothing but stand at the cliff. The unfairness of it ignited something in him. For once, his quiet nature bent under anger. He waited until the men moved on, then slipped through the alleys toward the cliffs. His heart hammered as he climbed the familiar path, each step heavy with urgency. The sky was calmer than the night before, but the waves still struck with force. And there was Brutus, unyielding, as though the storm had never ended. Calder crouched low, keeping his distance. "They're coming for you," he whispered, the words nearly lost in the wind. He wasn't sure why he spoke. Brutus couldn't understand him. Yet when the bull's ear twitched, Calder felt the same pull as before, that strange awareness between them. The sea roared beneath, and Calder's eyes caught something glinting in the foam far below the rocks. He narrowed his gaze. For a moment he thought it was a trick of the light, but the shimmer persisted, like metal teeth biting up from the waves. His chest tightened. Whatever it was, Brutus had been staring at it all along. The bull pawed the ground, muscles taut, as though warning Calder away from the edge. The boy obeyed, stepping back slightly, but his mind spun with questions. Why guard the cliff? Why here, of all places? The sound of boots on stone broke his thoughts. Calder ducked behind a boulder just as Holt's men arrived. 4 of them, broad-shouldered, carrying ropes coiled like serpents. One pointed toward the bull, voice low but clear. "There he is. Holt wants him alive, but if he fights, cut him down." Calder's breath caught. His fingers dug into the rock as he fought the urge to shout. He couldn't reveal himself, not yet. The men spread out, circling Brutus with practiced caution. The bull didn't move, head lowered, watching them with the patience of stone. One of the men muttered, "Why is it just standing there?" "Doesn't matter," another replied. "We end this tonight." Calder felt sweat gather on his neck despite the chill. His thoughts raced. If they captured Brutus, they would drag him away, maybe kill him, and no one would question it. No one but Calder. He pressed his lips together, heart pounding with a single realization. He couldn't stay hidden forever. As the first man drew closer with the rope, Calder stood. His voice cracked against the roar of the tide, desperate and loud. "Brutus!" The bull's head snapped up instantly, eyes blazing as if answering a call he had been waiting for. The men froze, startled, looking around for the source of the voice. Calder stepped out from behind the rock, trembling but unyielding. His chest rose and fell in sharp bursts as the men turned toward him. "Who's there?" one demanded. Calder swallowed hard, his throat dry. He didn't answer them. His eyes remained on Brutus, who took a slow, deliberate step away from the edge. The connection pulsed between them again, undeniable. Calder's fear twisted into something fiercer, determination. The men exchanged uneasy glances, muttering curses under their breath. One finally snarled, "It listens to him." Their words chilled Calder, but he stood his ground. He couldn't let them take Brutus. He didn't yet know how he would stop them, but the decision was already made. He would fight, not with strength, but with whatever courage he had left. And as the sea crashed below and Brutus's eyes locked on his, Calder realized this was no ordinary animal and no ordinary moment. The bull wasn't simply standing at the edge. He was guarding something far more dangerous, something Holt's men were desperate to uncover. The bull's refusal to leave the edge wasn't stubbornness. It was a warning. Calder crouched low in the grass, the chill of the night clinging to his skin, his notebook pressed tightly against his knees. The moonlight cut faint silver lines across the cliffs, painting Brutus in a glow that seemed almost otherworldly. The bull stood where he always did, close to the edge, chest rising and falling like a great engine. Calder opened the worn book, its pages crinkled with age and stained by salt. His brother's neat handwriting still filled the margins with sketches of coastlines and notes of hidden paths. Using a stub of charcoal, Calder began scribbling what he observed, the way Brutus shifted his weight, the subtle twitch of an ear whenever the tide crashed louder than usual, the way his head turned when Calder's voice broke the silence. He took a shaky breath and began to read softly from the notebook, words that weren't his own but maps and fragments his brother once cherished. Brutus's ear flicked. The boy's heart stuttered. He read again, slower this time, watching as the bull angled his head slightly toward him. It was subtle, but it was real. Calder whispered, "You hear me, don't you?" His voice was almost lost in the wind. The bull didn't move closer, but his massive frame no longer seemed tense. For Calder, that was enough. Each night he returned, scribbling notes, marking patterns, whispering words into the storm as though teaching himself a secret language only Brutus understood. The danger of being caught never left his mind, but the bond he felt was worth it. Every flick of the bull's ear, every glance that lingered a second too long, felt like proof. But danger found him sooner than he expected. One evening, When the stars were buried behind thick clouds, the scrape of boots on stone broke through the sound of the tide. Calder froze, notebook pressed against his chest. Lantern light spilled across the rocks, and 3 men emerged from the shadows. Their coats were heavy, faces sharp with suspicion. Holt's men. "There he is," one muttered. "The fisherman's boy." Calder's pulse raced. He stuffed the notebook under his tunic, but the nearest man was already stepping closer, eyes narrowing. "What are you doing out here?" the man demanded, voice low and accusing. His hand hovered near the coil of rope at his belt. "Nothing," Calder answered quickly, standing straighter than he felt. His hands trembled, but he forced them behind his back. "Just walking." "Walking?" another sneered. His gaze flicked toward Brutus, who stood calmly at the cliff's edge, unbothered by their arrival. "Near that beast?" "In the middle of the night?" Calder swallowed hard, but said nothing. His silence betrayed him. The tallest of the 3 narrowed his eyes. "Strange thing, boy. That bull doesn't charge you, doesn't flinch, almost like it knows you." The words pierced Calder's chest like a blade. His breath caught, and before he could muster a denial, the men exchanged grim looks. "We'll tell Holt," one of them said. "He'll want to hear this." Panic surged in Calder's chest. "No, it doesn't mean anything," he stammered, but they were already turning away, lantern swinging in the dark. He stood frozen long after they left, the sea raging below as if echoing his dread. Holt would know now. Calder clenched his fists, his notebook digging into his ribs. If Holt thought Brutus listened to him, then he was no longer just a boy on the cliffs. He was bait. The following days proved his fear correct. Holt's presence loomed larger over Harrowfen, his men stationed at the docks, his influence reaching into every conversation. Calder overheard his father at the tavern, speaking quietly with another fisherman. "Holt's obsessed," the man said, his voice low. "Claims that Bull's guarding something beneath the cliffs. Talks of ledgers and secrets worth more than gold." Calder's father shook his head. "And my boy? They say he's been seen near it. If Holt drags him into this mess—" Calder backed away before he could hear more, his chest heavy with dread. The mention of a ledger stuck in his mind like a thorn. Proof of Holt's dealings. Something dangerous enough to keep Brutus chained to the edge of the world. He returned to the cliffs, determination sharper than fear. Brutus stood as always, unwavering. Calder stepped closer than before, whispering urgently, "They'll use me to get to you. I won't let them, but I need to know what you're guarding." The bull's gaze held him, deep and unyielding. Calder followed it downward, toward the restless water. He noticed again the glimmer beneath the waves, iron shapes flashing like teeth when the struck right. His pulse quickened. He had to get closer. That night, Calder dreamt again. In the dream, the sea roared louder than ever, rising like a wall to devour the land. Men screamed, caught in the flood, their torches snuffed out one by one. But Brutus stood tall, hooves planted firmly as the water climbed. Calder called his name, voice breaking against the storm. The bull turned toward him, eyes filled with fire, and then the cliff gave way beneath them both. He woke with a gasp, sweat dampening his hair despite the chill. The dream lingered, heavy with warning. He sat upright, gripping his notebook, and began to carve small marks into stones he kept hidden near the hearth. Crude signals, arrows, paths, things only he would understand. If the cliffs collapsed or Holt's men came, he needed a way to guide himself back, and perhaps Brutus too. The villagers mocked him when they saw him wandering the shore by day, carving marks into rocks. "Chasing shadows," one man laughed. Calder lowered his head, refusing to explain. They didn't understand. They couldn't. He alone pieced the puzzle together. Calder's hands shook as he gripped the notebook he carried, the rain already soaking through its worn cover. He whispered to himself, trying to still the fear curling like ice in his stomach. "Think, Calder. Don't fight them their way." Think he had no weapon, no strength to match ropes and steel. But he had something else. His mind, and the stubborn will his late brother had once teased him for. His brother's voice seemed to echo in his thoughts, urging him to use what others overlooked. That voice steadied him now, even as thunder boomed overhead and the hunters closed their circle. When Holt ordered his men to sweep the caves below the cliff, Calder's chance came. He overheard them near the docks, their voices hushed but hurried. "Full search tomorrow. Holt wants the ledger found. Says it'll shut every mouth in this town." Calder's stomach dropped. If they reached the caves, they would find whatever Brutus guarded, and Holt would bury the truth. He had no choice. That night, with the sea restless under a bruised sky, Calder approached Brutus. His hands shook as he whispered, "Please, just for a while. Move away." The bull didn't respond at first, massive head lowered against the wind. Calder stepped closer, heart pounding. Brutus! His voice cracked with urgency. The bull turned, slow and reluctant, as though the weight of the world tethered him to the edge. Yet he stepped back, away from the cliff, muscles shifting with uneasy strength. Calder exhaled shakily. "Thank you," he whispered, though he knew Brutus didn't need the words. With the bull drawn away, Calder slipped down the narrow path into the caves. The air grew colder with every step, the sound of the tide echoing like drums against the stone. His lantern flickered, shadows clawing at the walls. The passage opened into a vast chamber, tide-carved and damp, the stench of rust and salt filling his lungs. Then he saw them, crates stacked in the darkness, waterlogged but intact. He pried one open, heart hammering. Inside lay rows of weapons, blades and rifles stamped with a familiar insignia, an angular crest he had seen on the machine's Aridane nexus built for the port. His throat tightened. These weapons had been hidden for years, concealed beneath the cliffs. He stumbled to another crate, forcing it open. Inside were chains, thick, brutal iron lengths ending in collars far too large for any normal animal. His stomach turned cold. He reached out, fingers brushing the metal, and felt the weight of realization crash upon him. These weren't for horses or cattle. Someone had planned for Brutus. The boy staggered back, lantern shaking in his grip. This wasn't chance. This wasn't a wild animal wandering into town. Brutus had been expected. Above him, the waves pounded against the stone as if trying to drown the truth. Calder pressed his back against the cave wall, heart pounding, a single terrifying question echoing in his mind. What was Brutus really, and why did the animal know its own name when called? The storm broke over Harrowfen in a sudden roar, wind shrieking through the cliffside as rain lashed the rocks in sheets. Lightning flared white across the black sky, and in its flash Calder saw them. Holt's hunters, figures hunched against the gale, moving with nets, ropes, and harpoons. Their boots struck the wet ground with certainty, closing in on Brutus like wolves encircling prey. The bull stood at the cliff's edge, massive frame braced against the storm, his breath steaming in ragged bursts, defiance in the set of his shoulders. Calder crouched among the slick rocks below, his heart pounding so hard he thought it might give him away. He had known this moment was coming, but not with such force, not with such precision. Holt hadn't come to test the bull, he had come to end him. The wind screamed as it ripped across the cliffs, carrying with it the sting of salt spray and the hollow roar of the tide hammering the rocks below. At the very edge, where one wrong step could mean death, the bull stood, muscles trembling against the storm. His massive frame was scarred, dark hide slick with mist, hooves scraping dangerously close to the drop. Brutus, though Calder had only ever heard his name whispered in fear, did not move. He stared into the horizon as if something invisible anchored him to the cliff's edge. The waves rose higher, slamming against the stone, but still he refused to back away. Calder's breath came fast, visible in the cold air. He should have turned back. Any other boy would have run the moment the storm grew wild, yet he felt his legs pulling him closer. The cliffs of Marrowfen were not a place for wandering at night, not when the path was narrow and the wind pressed against your back like unseen hands. But the sight of the bull gripped him, an enormous silhouette carved against the lightning. His chest tightened with awe and fear. Brutus. The word slipped from his lips before he had time to think. The reaction was immediate. The bull turned its head, eyes glowing with something more than animal instinct. For a heartbeat, Calder felt as though he had been seen, truly seen, as though Brutus knew him. His pulse raced. He took half a step back, boots slipping on wet stone, and steadied himself with a sharp inhale. The connection was brief, but undeniable, a spark that left him trembling. He could not explain why, but the moment the bull looked at him, he felt as if his life had changed course. Behind him, a voice called out, half swallowed by the storm. "Calder! What are you doing up there?" It was his father's voice, roughened by years of working the sea. Calder twisted his head and saw the faint glow of a lantern bobbing on the path. He didn't answer immediately. His throat tightened, caught between truth and silence. How could he explain what he had just seen? His father would never believe him. "I'm coming," Calder finally shouted back, though his eyes remained fixed on Brutus. The bull turned away again, head lowering, body swaying slightly as though he were caught between collapse and defiance. Calder wanted to stay, to whisper the name again, to test whether the creature would respond a second time. But the storm pressed harder, and his father's lantern drew closer. With a final glance, Calder forced himself to retreat down the path. At the cottage that night, the fire crackled low as Calder's father mended nets. The air smelled of tar and salt, hands roughened from endless work. Calder sat silently, the storm still pounding against the shutters. He tried to eat, but every bite tasted like ash. His mind replayed the moment Brutus turned, the burning recognition in the bull's eyes. "You've been wandering near the cliffs again," his father said, not looking up from his work. His tone carried a warning beneath its calm surface. "Stay clear of them. Nothing good comes from that edge. Storm's taken stronger men than you." Calder hesitated. "What if something's out there?" His father's hands paused briefly, then resumed. "Out there is the sea. It takes and takes, boy. Don't give it reason to take you." The words were final, leaving Calder no room to argue. He nodded, though his chest ached with unspoken truth. He couldn't tell his father about the bull, not now. The man had spent his life fighting storms and debts, with little patience for mysteries. Calder felt trapped in silence, the secret burning inside him. That night, as thunder rolled, Calder dreamt of Brutus again. The bull stood firm at the cliff, the sea rising to swallow the world, and in the dream, Calder called his name. The bull turned, and everything stopped. The storm, the tide, even Calder's breath. Then the ground cracked open beneath them. Calder woke with a start, sweat on his skin despite the cold. The dream lingered like a warning. The following day, whispers swept through Harrowfen. Holt, a merchant whose wealth reached into every corner of the town, had sent men along the coast. They carried nets, ropes, and long poles fitted with hooks. Calder overheard two fishermen talking outside the tavern, their voices low but urgent. "They're after the bull," one said, spitting into the dirt. "Holt says it's a danger to the port. Claims it'll scare off investors if folk keep whispering about curses." Brutus bellowed, a sound that cut through the storm, deep and raw. He stamped the ground, gouging mud, but did not flee. Calder's chest tightened at the sight. The bull was refusing to move, even as the men advanced. Holt had studied him well. Nets were cast to block retreat, and snares lay hidden along the slope, glinting faintly when lightning struck. Calder could see it now. If Brutus charged, he would tangle, and they would spear him down. Brute resistance would mean death. Calder's only weapon was strategy. He crept back, searching desperately for an angle. His mind raced to Holt's ledger, the one whispered about in tavern corners and hushed meetings. If it truly existed, hidden in the smuggler's caves below, it held proof of every bribe, every betrayal Holt had buried. Calder realized then with brutal clarity, the ledger was leverage. It might be the only thing Holt valued more than the bull. If Calder could reach it, he might bargain Brutus's life, or at least delay long enough to turn this battle on its head. Clutching the rocks for balance, Calder slid down toward the cave entrance, rain stinging his eyes. Above him, a harpoon whistled through the air, striking stone where Brutus had stood. The bull swung his head, horns flashing, scattering men with sheer presence, but even his strength had limits. Calder's pulse hammered in his ears as he slipped into the mouth of the cave, shadows swallowing him whole. The storm's roar dulled here, replaced by the drip of water and the creak of tide-shaken beams. The cave smelled of salt and rust. Old crates lay stacked against the walls, marked with the faded stamp of Eridane Nexus. Calder shoved them aside, hands slipping on wet wood, until his fingers brushed something softer. Oilskin, wrapped tight. His breath caught as he pulled it free. A water-stained book, thick and heavy. He tore the covering away just enough to glimpse ink lines inside, names and numbers crawling across the pages. It was real. The ledger existed. A shiver ran through him at the thought of what it meant. Holt's power, built on this secret record, could crumble if exposed. He tucked it under his arm, his resolve tightening. This was not just about Brutus anymore. It was about the village, the men ruined by Holt's schemes, the families left with nothing. Calder turned to run back, but a figure blocked the cave mouth. Lightning lit the merchant's face in stark relief. Holt stood there, rain dripping from his cloak, his smile thin and sharp as a blade. "You've been busy, boy," Holt said, his voice carrying even against the storm. He stepped inside, boots crunching on gravel. "I wondered who kept sniffing around the caves. And here you are, holding the very thing I warned others never to touch." Calder's breath caught, but he held the ledger tighter. "This doesn't belong to you," he said, forcing strength into his voice. His fingers trembled, though he hid them behind the book. "It belongs to everyone you've cheated." Holt chuckled darkly, the sound echoing off stone. "Brave words, but you don't understand what you're meddling in." He leaned closer, lowering his voice. "That bull, Brutus as you call him, he's not some wild miracle. Years ago, Eridane Nexus ran experiments. They bred animals for endurance, strength, and memory. Most died. One lived. He escaped, carrying scraps of what they built into him. That's why he responds to a name. That's why he stands like a man when cornered. He is a mistake that should have been erased long ago." Calder's stomach twisted. The words felt too sharp, too heavy. Brutus was not just an animal. He was something more, something shaped by hands far crueler than Calder had imagined. Yet Holt spoke with the certainty of a man who wanted silence, not truth. Calder stepped back, shaking his head. "He isn't a mistake," he whispered, though his throat tightened. "He's alive. And he's free. That's more than I can say for you." The merchant's smile vanished, replaced with cold fury. "Give me the ledger," Holt demanded, hand outstretched, "or I'll take it from your corpse." Calder's chest burned with fear, but he refused. Instead, he did the only thing left to him. He shouted, voice breaking as it tore through the storm, "Brutus!" The name cracked like thunder, rolling across the cliffs. Outside, the bull's head snapped toward the cave. Even through the rain, even through the spears lodged in his flank, Brutus heard. With a bellow that shook the ground, he surged forward. The hunters staggered, their nets torn aside as the beast charged with fury born of pain and fire. Men were flung into the mud, ropes snapping under his weight. Harpoons struck but glanced off, deflected by sheer force. Calder stumbled from the cave, clutching the ledger, just as the ground quaked. The cliff shuddered, great cracks splitting through the stone as Brutus's hooves tore furrows into the earth. Water surged below, waves clawing at the crumbling rock. Calder's eyes widened. If the cliff gave way, they would all be swallowed. Then he saw Holt, struggling against the storm's push, his cloak whipping around him. The merchant's boots slipped, gravel cascading into the sea. He clawed at the rocks, desperation twisting his features. "Help me!" Holt shouted, voice raw. "Save me, boy!" "I'll give you anything. Money, land, safety." Calder froze. The ledger pressed against his chest like a heartbeat. This was the moment. The dramatic irony of it burned. Holt, who had ruined lives, who had sought to chain a living creature, now begged for mercy. But Calder saw clearly now. If Holt lived, the ledger would be stolen back, hidden, and justice would die. If Holt fell, countless lives might finally be free. His hand tightened on the ledger, rain dripping from his lashes. He stepped back. "No," Calder said, voice low but firm, carried on the storm. "You've taken enough." Holt's eyes widened in horror. His fingers slipped, and with a scream drowned by thunder, he plunged into the sea below. The storm swallowed him, leaving only the roar of waves and the taste of salt in the air. Calder staggered forward, chest heaving. Brutus limped toward him, battered and bleeding, but alive. The bull lowered his head slightly, as though acknowledging Calder's choice, their survival bound together in silence. The cracks spread wider across the cliff, stones tumbling into the sea. The boy whispered, voice breaking, "Come on! This way!" Brutus obeyed, his great body swaying as they moved together through the storm, away from the edge, away from the ruin behind them. They had won for now, but the cost of their defiance was only beginning to unfold. Harrowfen buzzed with rumors in the days that followed the storm. The market stalls, once filled with casual chatter about fishing hauls and broken tools, now thrummed with hushed speculation. Men leaned close over mugs of bitter ale, whispering about the bull. Some swore Brutus had been swallowed by the sea, dragged down with Holt and the broken cliffs. Others claimed they had seen him vanish into the black woods beyond the village, a shadow with horns slipping between trees. A few insisted Calder had led him away like some strange shepherd, a boy guiding a beast no man could tame. None of them knew the truth. Calder kept it close, hidden beneath the steady rhythm of his daily routine, though inside him every thought revolved around two secrets: the ledger pressed into his keeping, and the bull who still lingered near the forest's edge. Each evening, when dusk spread purple over the land, Calder slipped quietly away from the village. His boots followed the same half-forgotten trail through bracken and moss, until the trees opened to the place where forest met cliff. There, he would pause, heart tight, and call the name softly into the wind. Brutus. Sometimes silence answered, the woods heavy and still. Other times faintly, he would hear a shifting of weight, the snap of a branch, or catch the glint of dark eyes watching from beyond the shadows. The bull never came too close, but his presence was unmistakable. It was enough. That silent recognition steadied Calder, reminding him of the bond forged in storm and blood. Disclaimer: the story you just watched is fictional. It explores themes of empathy, unexpected connections, and the profound unspoken bonds between a human and an animal. This narrative aims to highlight that true understanding transcends fear, and that a powerful connection can be found in the most unlikely of places.